Hi, I am Zero Mega One Spawn. To give some context to future mousepad reviews, I'm going to go over my starting mousing surface slash pads. The first mousepad I had was a speed stacking mat that came with the speed stacking set. While it was on the slow side, and not intended for computer mice, it still formed pretty well for what it was. Like with older mousepads around the time, I found it a little thin and lacking. I was quite susceptible to developing creases in its rubber backing, as well as having any texture beneath it felt through onto the mouse, which definitely negatively affected the mousing experience. Another mousepad I had was a merchandise mousepad, which honestly wasn't all that good. While I really liked the design, it actually performed similarity to the speed stacking mat that I used prior, both in terms of it being an overall slower pad and being very thin and a more cheap rubber base on it, leading it to be prone to develop imperfections that noticeably impacted the feel of the mouse on the pad. Ultimately, it wasn't really the mousepad I was looking for, since at the time I was looking for something a little faster and hopefully a little more high-end in its design. As I heard, it was a pretty decent feeling and quick pad. Even though it still suffered a lot of the drawbacks of the other two pads, I found its sheer size combined with its speed and smoothness led to a pretty good feeling under my arm and mouse. Even still, though I found it pretty fast when I started to use it, the more I used it, the more I felt like I wanted to try even faster pad. The next pad that I got, and the last of the pads that I don't have on me right now, is the glorious Helios XL. It was pretty nice at first, as it was my first experience with a genuinely fast pad, though combined with it being way thinner and being very easy to bend since it's just solid plastic, and on top of being adhered to the surface by essentially just glue, I ended up not really liking that pad, as it didn't really hold up long term, especially since I would be moving the pad around from place to place as I used it. Although if I really wanted to, I probably could have attached it to something more permanently, kind of like the Artisan RM series, just without a purpose-built backing. With all state issues, including the fact that it being a solid plastic pad, it would wear down pretty quickly, which led me to look for newer pads, hopefully more durable ones. After plenty of searching around, and sort of rediscovering Artisan, so I've heard them a bit before, but I never really looked into them, I decided to get the Shidenkai, which contrary to what I read online, mine has actually lasted pretty well over the years that I've had it, with only the most notable wear being actually done more recently, where I accidentally drop a soldering iron onto it. To get some extra speed and just to see how it feels, I sprayed a diving spray, like a sort of silicone spray that I used to protect diving suits, onto it. Aside from making it way faster until the silicone wore off, which actually if I applied it pretty well, it would actually last quite a while. But anyways, what I'm thinking is the silicone spray may have, similar to how it works in diving suits, maybe enhanced its durability a little bit over the years. Since my pad is easily over like 5 years old, and I wouldn't say it feels good as new, but it's still pretty fast and slick. I later on went to get the V2, and the V1 is still faster. I like the V1 so much, this was considered the fastest pad at the time, or at least one of them. I never really felt the need to get another one. This was my main and only pad, even after switching mice up plenty of times, up until and after its discontinuation. And then when I heard about a V2 being made, I decided I'd get that, see how it is. And since I got the original in extra soft, I decided I would get the V2 in mid, especially since I was hearing from people that it wasn't quite as fast as the V1. One thing I really like about the V1 is this is a very rough but slick sort of glassy surface, and the mousing experience is very smooth as well. But, yeah, little rough. I'm not sure what I like better purely texture-wise. The V2 feels more like, more clothy or leathery, since the beads are deeper in the pad. Ultimately, I'm not sure which one I prefer, even though in terms of feel, though I do like the speed of the V1 a bit more. Since the beads on the V2 were embedded deeper for more durability, it gives it more of a cloth feeling, in a weird way, almost like a leathery feeling too. It's definitely slower than the V1 was. Even my ancient V1 is still a bit faster. And I've also used the silicone diving spray on the V2, so that wouldn't be a reason why the V1 would still be faster. As far as durability is concerned, it definitely is at least a little more durable, since with use and transportation, I don't really feel any like beads falling off of it or sand that I do on the original. But it also started a bit slower and still is a bit slower, so I can't really make a direct comparison to how long it would last speed-wise. It's a bit of an unfair comparison. All in all, these really were the best cloth pads I've had. Granted, I haven't had too many, But I have had the privilege of trying a few here or there. Not too long after I got the V2, WALLHACK, now SkyPad, released the SP004, which, still being a speed demon, I had to pick that up. So I got the SP004 as my first glass pad. Try it out and see how I like, or if I like, glass surfaces. This pad started with a very odd reputation, as some people would say it's slower than the old one, some people would say it's faster than the old one, but the predominant idea seemed to be that it was faster. And in fact, that this was the fastest pad on the market. So chasing speed, I had to get it. One thing to note, like many reviews, I found this pad started off a little slower and got faster with use, almost as if it's taking advantage of PTFE's self-lubricating properties. All in all, it's a very well-made, smooth, and fast pad. So especially after trying future pads, small, like very small movements have just a little bit of sticking. I was just so sure at first how I feel about the rigidity, but going from the Shidenkai V1 extra soft and V2 mid, almost, as well as my experience of the Helios, almost prepped me, or slowly got me used to using harder and harder pads. After the SP004, I took a bit of a detour from glass pads and ended up picking up a resin pad. To be more specific, the SpeedM by Npet was becoming known as the new contender for fastest pad. But I say it's definitely not false. This is a pretty fast, but a little rough pad. Another thing is it's a very stiff pad with the ever so slightest bit of softness to it because of the foam layer. Combined with this sort of silicone grippy like back sponge that some like lint rollers would have, makes it remind me of a much more fleshed out and high quality Helios. Having a proper foam backing along with a sticky surface that isn't just glue and adheres and unadheres pretty well. After the SpeedM, or I guess while I had the SpeedM, I've been hearing about this new fastest pad on the block called the Beast. Eventually I heard there's going to be a new drop of the Beast, aka the Guardian. After looking at a bunch of info on the Beast, I decided to get the Guardian. See what all the hubbub was about. Overall, I gotta say, I quite enjoy its surface texture and speed. Might sound odd, but overall, I found the surface had a bit of a dry but controlled sort of speedy feeling to it. And one thing I really enjoyed is that when I made small movements with the mouse, it didn't really stick too much. Or at least not as much as on the SkyPad copy that I have did. Which I really feel it lends to the overall higher controllability of the mouse. Because with the SkyPad, I felt it was hard to make really small movements as there's a bit of a sticky feeling, which I don't feel as much on the Guardian. Overall, I found the Guardian had a dry roughness to it, sort of like not quite as smooth, but still pretty slick. Whereas the SP004 had more of like a wet slickness to it, which also contributed to small mouse movements kind of feeling sticky. Weird example, if the Guardian is an air hockey table, I guess the SP004 is more of an ice rink. So it's like where the ice is melted a little bit, causing a smoother glide, but also causing the mouse skates to sort of like stick it just a little bit. The next glass pad I got was for two reasons. One, because I wanted to try a little more controlled pad. Though it's still glass, it's not really that controlled. But yeah, I'm just see what it's like. Also because it's one of the only really good, I mean really good, budget pads. That is the Singularity. If I had to choose between the Singularity and the SP004, I'd definitely pick the Singularity personally. As even though it's on a little more of the controlled side, it doesn't, maybe because it's just slower overall, but it doesn't have that, I find it doesn't have that sticky feeling for really fine movements. Of course, besides being way cheaper, while it's more of a control pad, its more control aspects makes it feel much smoother and more consistently so, since it doesn't have that weird stick that I get sometimes on the SP004. As an aside, I have a pair of the X-ray pad in WALLHACK Obsidian's Pro Skates. And one thing I find is weird is that I always hear people say that it didn't function that well on the SkyPad 3. They're essentially designed for the SP04 in mind, but oddly enough, I always found that those skates feel better on every pad but the SP04. As for me on the SP04, it feels like it takes that sticky sensation that when I move my mouse just a little bit, it essentially makes it universal were just always there no matter how far I move my mouse. That makes it way too controlled for me. Which, funny enough, I find it doesn't have that effect on my Npet SpeedM, which I really enjoyed those skates on, and the Guardian, as well as the Singularity. Overall, I find it has a very uniform texture. It has a very consistent speed and smoothness, almost no matter how fast or slow I'm moving my mouse. While it does feel slightly slower when moving my mouse really fast, it could just be due to me applying a bit more pressure when I'm doing so, which all in all is actually pretty good for stopping power. Well, I'll probably end up missing the drop for it. One pad that I'm kind of interested in is the Phantom, also by Tekkusai, which Tekkusai referred to as the Beast 2.0. That sounds pretty good. Could always use a faster pad. Well, until I guess the mouse literally flies off the desk or something. It's really nice to see the limits of speed in mouse pads while still being controlled. Well, that's all the pads I have. Later, nerds!